can you tell us about Emmanuel Macron's role on the geopolitical stage?
Thank you very much for your question. Emmanuel Macron is an interesting figure, of course, right now because he has quite tough days in internal politics. But what about G7 summit? I think there will be more pressure in case of tariff talks, in case of EU or between EU and US. I think Emmanuel Macron will push more on topic between Ukraine versus Russia, about Middle East flashpoints and this happening, what happens right now, and maybe critical mineral supply chains, and in connection with Greenland, for example, because Emmanuel Macron visited Greenland as some highlight to show of support to Greenland sovereignty. But yeah, maybe it will be quite tough talks with Donald Trump, but we will see what will happen. Yeah.
Yes, Marian, I do apologise. We had an administrative issue on our end. You are, of course, joining us as a European affairs expert in Brussels. Let's look at the European Union and the role that it will play in these discussions. Of course, Ursula von der Leyen is there, several leaders from top nations within the European Union, not just Emmanuel Macron, but also Friedrich Merz as well. Trade is a huge talking point. A US-EU deal is potentially close, but conversations have been had and rhetoric hasn't always been easy between the two groups. With Ursula von der Leyen, Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron there, what conversations can be had, what bilateral, trilateral or quadrilateral conversations could be had with the US about getting a deal over the line?
Yeah, I think this trade tariff negotiations will be in the first place. It's the most important topic right now. Maybe it will be about coordinated sanctions because EU just proposed its 18th sanctions package targeting Russian energy, banking and defense sectors ahead of this summit. Yes, the EU is, maybe we can say, threatened by US in case of tariffs. Yes, EU will use its own looming tariff actions, yeah, like for example digital service taxes and the pause in US tariffs as a kind of leverage to secure a favorable deal. I think there will be some kind of discussion about the Middle East because in this topic EU was not very active. Now some leaders from European nations activated their rhetoric to this kind of topic. And maybe it will be about digital resilience, about critical minerals, and about all these topics. But I think it is when we mentioned EU leaders, they really neglected some topics, and they would need some higher tempo in these discussions and dialogue.
Marian, let's move from trade to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Of course, a key point, but maybe not one that will have the spotlight quite like the Iran-Israel war and tensions that we've seen. Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be present for at least part of this G7 summit. What does his attendance signify in terms of a Western response to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war?
I think this summit will be kind of surprise for him because he got much of attention before in many formats, in many summits. But this summit will be really different. And I think Mr. Zelensky will feel himself like a forgotten person because these new topics which are happening right now around the world are so hot and so actual and so urgent in some sense that Ukraine can be really forgotten, and Mr. Zelensky as well. So I don't know what role he will play in this summit. Maybe really some formal, maybe some diplomatic, but really not some important role.
Yes, Marian, let's now turn our attention to those recent tensions between Israel and Iran. France, the United Kingdom, while the UK aren't part of the European Union, still a European nation and align with many of the European Union countries on many topics and issues. How do you think a European response will come when there is potential risk and threat coming from Iran, like the one that we heard when they said that any UK or French action stopping their drones or missiles would lead to attacks on UK or French bases and shipping?
Everything what EU leaders or leaders of European countries will do, it will be just signal diplomacy, I would say. And it's a very similar situation like in connection to Ukraine, that this conflict will be dealt on the base of world powers like US, like Russia, and of course physical actors in this conflict. This is the situation in the Middle East is very similar, because these actors will be the most important in discussions how we will deal with. So Europe will not play some important role in this case, at least in this summit, at least in these first days, first weeks after escalation. So I would not see or Ms. Lyon or Ms. Callas, Mr. Macron or Merz as some significant actors in this sense. Maybe there will be some pompous rhetoric, some rhetoric, big words, and as I said, signal diplomacy. But something really important I would not expect from this side.
Okay, Marian, I do have some breaking news to bring on what has been our top story now for several days. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has revealed that he informed US President Donald Trump in advance of Israel's latest military strikes on Iran. Speaking to Fox News, an interview which we have already brought you updates on, Netanyahu described the level of cooperation between Israel and the current US administration as unprecedented. He said Israel is sharing every piece of intelligence with Washington, underscoring the depth of coordination between the two allies. Netanyahu also claimed that regime change in Iran could emerge as a consequence of Israel's military campaign. He stressed that de-escalation or ceasefire is not the priority, but rather stopping Iran, which he described as a mortal threat to Israel, the Gulf states, the US, and to Europe. Well, as we bring you that breaking news, I do want to thank Marian Duris for joining us. Make sure you're staying tuned to NewsX World for all of the latest from this G7 summit and the ripple effects from tensions in the Middle East and across the world.
I'm Megha Sharma and I'm in these gorgeous locales of Cananasis. Cananasis is the location where the G7 Leaders Summit is taking place between June 15th and June 17th. The global heads of the biggest economies of the world are going to descend in this place, including the United States President Donald Trump, the French President Emmanuel Macron, and the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. It is a summit that is going to be overshadowed by the Israel-US-Iranian conflict. It is going to be overshadowed by the Ukraine-Russia